evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. My name is Victoria Beadle, and I'm the CEO of Melanoma Patients Australia, and your host for tonight's webinar, which will shine a spotlight on the fear of recurrence. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge country. We pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the lands and the elders, both past and present, and acknowledging the deep continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the land, the waters, and the sky. Tonight is the final part of our webinar series brought to you by Melanoma Patients Australia and Melanoma Institute Australia. Our first webinar was on clinical trials. It was a great success, and followed by one on mucosal melanoma, which was equally fantastic. Both of these recordings are now available online on the MIA and the MPA website for you to access. Tonight's webinar is the final one in our series, and I'd like to say a very special thank you to all of you who've dialed in, some of you here for the third time. Amazing. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce all three of our speakers for this evening. We're very, very grateful that we have Dr. Lisa Gomes and Claire Gore, followed by Ingrid Kivikoski, who'll be sharing her personal story. Now, you should be able to see our speakers tonight. You can all give us a wave. Good evening. How are you all? I'd like to introduce first Dr. Lisa Gomes, who's a clinical psychologist with more than 10 years experience working with patients and families. Lisa is now the senior clinical psychologist at MIA in the clinical psychology service, in addition to providing direct assessment and therapy to patients. Lisa's involved in providing educational seminars to patients and professionals and research activities. And prior to her current role, Lisa was involved in the psychological support implementation study at MIA. A very warm welcome. I'd like to also welcome Claire Gore, who's a psychologist also with 10 years experience working in private and public health settings. She has a particular interest in the psychosocial impacts of cancer and currently works as a psychologist at MIA in the clinical psychology service, but also at Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Melbourne. Welcome, Lisa. Our last speaker this evening is Ingrid Kivikoski, and Ingrid was diagnosed with melanoma a week before Christmas in 2016. Hi, Ingrid. After discovering a lump above her breast. This led to a full axillary lymph node dissection, and stage 3 with an unknown primary was the diagnosis. It was followed by a month of radiation, and 7 months later, Ingrid became stage 4 and started on her targeted therapy. Within a few months of treatment, Ingrid showed no evidence of disease and is still on the targeted therapy after 6 years with minimal side effects. Ingrid is an amazing volunteer for Melanoma Patients Australia up in Brisbane, and is our support group facilitator along with Brian Bailey. She does a huge amount to raise awareness of melanoma and share her personal story, and has spoken at many events for us. And in exciting news, Ingrid has just become an oma, Dutch for grandmother, and has recently returned from a trip to her home in the Netherlands, homeland in the Netherlands, I should say. 2 things she didn't think she'd get to experience when first diagnosed with melanoma. In her spare time, Ingrid is a sensei of ikebana, which is Japanese art of flower arranging. I didn't know that about you, Ingrid. That's the first time I'd heard that. It's wonderful, so exciting. And also teacher in paper crafts and card making. I am so grateful to all of our speakers for making their time available this evening. We're going to have a wonderful evening of presentations. So we'll get started with them, and I'd like to invite Lisa and Claire back to do their presentation on fear of recurrence. So welcome back to the stage.
Thank you, Victoria, for that warm introduction, and good evening, everybody listening at home tonight or joining us online on the recording. I'll start by giving a bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. Firstly, we're going to take a good look at the fear of melanoma recurrence. I'm going to take you through the who, what, when, how, and why, as well as some ways to manage high distress at times when the fear is more intense. Lisa will then take you through some practical strategies for managing fear of melanoma recurrence and where to seek additional support if needed. So for ease tonight, Lisa and I are going to refer to fear of melanoma recurrence as FMR. So what is it? Broadly speaking, FMR is the fear or worry about melanoma returning or progressing, and it can often include worries about needing further treatment, the possibility of death, the impact that this might have on loved ones, friends, family, pets, or the disruption to daily life. And it's safe to say that most people with melanoma will experience some form of FMR. In Australia, 86% of survivors with metastatic melanoma will experience some form of FMR, and more broadly, 97% of people with any cancer type report fears of cancer progressing or recurring. So if you are experiencing some FMR, it is safe to say that you are not alone. How does it show up? Worries about melanoma that you can't get out of your head, constant checking of moles, skin, maybe booking appointments with doctors, requesting tests and scans more often than is recommended by your medical team, or alternatively, avoiding medical reviews or skin checks. You might have difficulty focusing on daily activities due to worries about melanoma. You might have poor sleep. You might notice changes in your mood, feeling anxious, irritable, or down. You might find yourself withdrawing from loved ones. Sometimes we hear that they just don't get it or they just don't understand. You might find it's difficult to plan for the future because you're worried about the uncertainty that comes from melanoma. So when does it occur? And although it's very common, there are certain situations where FMR might feel more intense. That might be waiting for results of a recent biopsy or scan, might be attending follow-up appointments or sitting in the waiting room at the doctor's office. At the end of treatment, people can feel quite contained during treatment, and then afterwards we sometimes see an increase in anxiety when people are faced with uncertainty. Again, what's next? When you feel unwell or notice changes in your body. After melanoma, people might be more attentive to their bodies, maybe hypervigilant, more likely to think the changes that they notice in body are related to melanoma. Might be special occasions, birthdays, holidays. Sometimes people are more reflective around these times. Anniversaries of major medical events. For example, the date of diagnosis, completion of treatment, hearing about someone else's melanoma. That might be someone's diagnosis or recurrence. It also includes hearing or reading stories in the news or on social media, or hearing about other people that you might know. Having to deal with ongoing side effects from treatment, and that might be medication that you need to take long term. It might be chronic pain, changes in physical appearance or body image due to treatment for melanoma. Or even just passing by the centre where you received treatment. This can bring up unpleasant memories. Lisa's going to come back to this a bit later for some more reflection. So, why do we experience FMR? A melanoma diagnosis can be traumatic. Treatment can be traumatic. And the possibility of a recurrence or disease progression is perceived by the brain as a threat. These particular times, the threat might seem more imminent, and so distress can be higher. When faced with a threat, our body activates the fight or flight response to prepare us to face this danger. So our adrenal glands, which sit just above the kidney, release the hormone adrenaline and also cortisol to signal to the other body parts to prepare to respond to the danger. Our heart beats faster to pump blood around to our arms and legs where it is needed to fight or flight. Our breathing becomes quicker and shallower. We breathe in more and more oxygen to power those muscles. The blood is being pumped by the heart, full of oxygen. Because we are breathing in more oxygen than we're using up, we might start to feel dizzy or lightheaded. Our muscles get tense. You might notice in yourself a jittery leg, feeling restless, twitchy, unable to sit still. Those muscles are turning on, they are getting activated, ready to respond to the threat, to fight or flight. Your hands might start to get cold. The blood vessels in your hands contract to push the blood to those larger muscle groups where it's needed to fight or flight, and you might start to get sweaty. With all these changes in the body, you're probably feeling quite hot, and our body sweats to cool down. A cool machine is an efficient machine. You might get the urgency to empty your bladder. You know, people talk about having nervous wheeze, of having to go to the toilet to empty the bladder. Your bladder muscles relax in response to stress. The digestive system takes a lot of energy in the body, and when that fight or flight response turns on, the digestive system shuts down to conserve energy. We've got something like 7 or 8 meters of intestines wrapped up inside our gut. And so when that fight or flight response activates, the blood that is sitting inside the gut leaves to go out to the arms and legs to fight or flight. And that feeling of the blood leaving the gut gives us that nausea or that butterfly feeling in the stomach. The mouth, being the very top of the digestive system, gets dry. We're not producing as much saliva when that fight or flight response is activated because the digestive system has shut down. We're not using it. And your thoughts race. Your brain is scanning for a way out of that danger. It is trying to problem solve. It is looking for an escape route. And that can mean when the fight or flight response is activated, it is really hard to think about anything else other than the threat. When we're faced with a threat, such as the fight or flight response, it can feel really uncomfortable. It is an evolutionary survival instinct, and it is really helpful for us when our lives are in danger. But if you're sitting in the waiting room at the doctor's office and this has activated, it can feel really uncomfortable and really distressing. So what are we going to do about it? Of all the physiological sensations we experience when that fight or flight response is activated, breathing is one of the only ones that we have any control over. You can't will your heart rate to slow down. You can't will your digestive system back online, but you can slow down the breathing and re-regulate the breath. Relaxation breathing, sometimes called abdominal or belly breathing, is slower and occurs deeper down in the diaphragm rather than up in the chest. If you were to just rest your hand above your belly button, that is where we want to breathe into for relaxation breathing. There are no right or wrong rules about how long you should count while you're breathing. As long as it is slower than your regular breathing rate, find something that works for you. We want to aim for at least 7 to 8 minutes at a time. If you can do 10, great, but it needs to be more than sort of 10 deep breaths. For some guided breathing activities, you can check out various apps such as Insight Timer. The Cancer Council has a great podcast called Finding Calm During Cancer, which talks through some breathing exercises. And the Centre for Clinical Intervention, which is the Western Australian Government website, has some really good anxiety self-help resources, including one on breathing retraining. If you just search online for relaxation breathing, abdominal breathing, belly breathing, anything that you see there will probably be okay too, if you'd like something guided. So grounding. When we talk about grounding, we're talking about getting out of your head and getting connected and engaged with the environment around you. The simplest way to do this is to use your 5 senses. So with sight, just look around you. Name 5 things that you can see and look at them as though you've never seen them before, really paying attention to them. Alternatively, you can simply sit and watch, noticing the movement of the leaves on the tree, noticing the clouds as they pass by, noticing colours, noticing shapes. Sound. You might try listening to some relaxing music or singing to yourself, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, or just notice what you can hear around you. For taste, try sipping on a herbal tea, sucking on a boiled lolly or a mint. I really like those sour warhead lollies that you used to get in the show bags at the Easter show. They are really sour. And I guarantee if you've got one of those in your mouth and you are sucking on that, you are not thinking about anything else. Smell. You know, we've heard of the benefits of aromatherapy on reducing stress. So scents like lavender, vanilla can be calming. So carry some things with you that smell nice, have a calming scent. Or spend time in the garden and literally stop and smell the roses. As you go for a walk, as we come into spring, notice the smell, the scents in the air. And touch. Your skin is your body's largest organ, and it is really receptive to external stimuli, which makes it a fantastic tool in your ability to relax. So try altering your temperature. Soak in a warm bath or a shower. Feel the warmth of the sun on your back. Splash some cold water on your face. Put a hot or a cold washer on the back of your neck or on your forehead. Try feeling different sensations. Take your shoes off and walk barefoot in the grass. Put on some really comfortable clothing. Bring some movement into your body. Focus on your muscles. Stretch them out, particularly if your muscles are tense with the activation of that fight or flight response. Things like massage and movement can be really helpful. You might also like to pack some of these sensory tools into a bag to take with you as you wait for test results. So things like photos to look at, music to listen to, mints to suck on, oils to smell, hand creams for touch and for scent, and some stress balls or fidget toys to give you that sensation in your hands. And distraction. Distraction is anything that you do temporarily to take your attention away from that strong emotion. Sometimes focusing on the emotion can make it feel more intense. I'm sure people have experienced feeling anxious about being anxious, and all that tends to do is increase the anxiety. So temporarily distracting yourself may give the emotion some time to decrease in intensity, which can make that easier to manage. I've listed some common distraction activities there. Connecting with people, getting out and doing some exercise, movement, doing something creative, watching something funny, reading, doing something around the house, getting your mind engaged. Counting backwards in sevens from a large number is a good one. It takes a lot of concentration and focus to do that, or challenge yourself with some crosswords, Sudokus. I invite you as well to think about your own distraction activities and what works for you. A key feature of distraction, and I really want to emphasize this, is that it is temporary. It's not about trying to escape or avoid a feeling. With distraction, it is implied that you return to that feeling once it feels less intense. I'm going to hand over to Lisa now to provide some practical strategies for managing these feelings.
Thank you, Claire. I'm just going to slide in. So thanks, Claire, for such a comprehensive overview of peer melanoma recurrence and some great tips for managing high distress associated with FMR. So now what we're going to do is look at some practical strategies for every day that you can use to manage FMR. So the first strategy we're going to look at is detached mindfulness. And detached mindfulness has been described as a state of awareness of internal events. So, for example, thoughts, feelings, or physical symptoms, without any attempt to judge, react, or suppress them. The aim of detached mindfulness is not to get rid of worries, but rather to help you learn to get less caught up in them. And so I often tell my patients that detached mindfulness is about taking an emotional step back from those thoughts, those distressing thoughts, feelings, and physical symptoms. So the first step or one way you can practice detached mindfulness is by noticing, labeling, and or acknowledging the unpleasant thoughts, feelings, or physical symptoms. So I'm going to take you back to this slide that Claire showed you early on, and I'd like you just to look through the list and think about what are some certain situations that might increase FMR. And if you'd like, you can pop that in the chat to share to share with us. Okay, I can see someone from Sydney is saying that their FMR occurs when waiting for results of recent biopsies. Thank you. So coming back to detached mindfulness. So with these situations in mind, when inevitably the unpleasant thoughts, feelings, or physical sensations show up, you can say to yourself, there's that anxiety I was expecting to experience that usually occurs before I have my follow-up appointment with my dermatologist, or I can feel my heart beating faster. That's the anxiety I was expecting as I wait for the doctor to call me about my scan results. Another strategy for detached mindfulness is using metaphors. So metaphors are often helpful in taking a step back from worries. And so there's lots of different metaphors that people can use. Really common ones are placing those unpleasant thoughts, feelings, or physical symptoms on a cloud and watching them float across the sky. Another common one is placing them on leaves and watching that float down the stream. So following the use of either of these strategies, the noticing, labeling, and or acknowledging thoughts or utilising the metaphors, it's then really important to redirect our attention back to what's important. And so sometimes it can be really helpful to to focus on the minute details of the tasks at hand. So for example, if you're cooking dinner, noticing the textures of the ingredients you're using, the aromas, the tastes, the different colours that you're using. So really focusing in on the task that you're doing. So when talking to my patients about detached mindfulness, I often tell them they don't need to like or want these worries, these thoughts, feelings, physical symptoms about melanoma recurrence, but just to acknowledge them and then redirect their attention back to what's important to them in the here and now. Okay. So the next strategy we're going to look at is worry postponement. And so worry postponement is another strategy to help cope with worries that can be used as an alternative or in addition to detached mindfulness. And so I often think about worry postponement as a containment strategy. Worry postponement is not trying to get rid of thoughts or feelings. It's about noticing your thoughts and feelings and then genuinely promising yourself to return to them at a later planned time and place where you're in a much better headspace to deal with them. So it's important to acknowledge that some worry is helpful in motivating us to face or attend to what we need to. However, when worrying so much starts to interfere with our daily life, we need a strategy to contain these worries. And so a way to manage these worries is to postpone your worry to a pre-planned worry period of time. And this can often give people a greater sense of control. So we're going to look at the different steps for worry postponement. The first step is to set a worry time. So choosing a particular time, place, and period of time. And length of time. So in terms of the time, you want to choose a time that's convenient and regular and a time that usually occurs just before natural transition. So an example of a natural transition might be having a worry time just before picking the kids up from school, because once the kids get in the car, you can't really focus on your worries anymore. They're too distracted. Your kids need your attention then. We want to try and avoid setting a worry time just before bed as well. So we don't want you to be worrying about things whilst you're in bed or trying to go to sleep. Choosing a place, choose a place that's unique and comfortable and free from distraction. And it shouldn't, again, be somewhere you go to that you go to relax. So for example, the bedroom. And we want to set a specific time, a specific length of time for that worry time. So usually we say about 10 to 20 minutes. The second step is to postpone your worries. So when your worries come up during the day, I encourage my patients just to write down in, 2 to 3 words, a dot point of what that worry is about, then close their book and remind themselves that they're going to come back to it at a pre-planned time. And then turn their attention back to what they need to do in the here and now. The third step is what to do during your pre-planned worry period. So when it is time for your worry time, you have a look through your list of worries and see if you can cross off anything that no longer seems relevant anymore. And you'll end up having a slightly shorter list. Also, another tip for this pre-planned worry time is you don't need to solve all your worries in one go. You can always transfer some of those worries onto your list for the next day's worry time. And so when working through your worry list, it's helpful to use a problem-solving strategy. So in terms of a problem-solving strategy, there's 3 questions that we encourage our patients to ask themselves. One is around, what is making me feel sad, angry, worried? What is it about? To kind of define what that worry is. The second step is there anything I can do about this? If yes, then make a plan of the steps you're going to take. If no, then you need to be able to accept you can't do anything and instead focus on other engaging or enjoyable activities. And then the third question to ask is there anything I can do about it now? And if there is, then go ahead and do it. And if no, make a plan to do it. So for those who like apps, there's a great app called Worry Time by Reach Out that helps you set a worry time, helps you to keep a list of worries as well. The next strategy we're going to look at is self-compassion, or being kind to ourselves. So for almost all of us, when things are difficult or hard, we will have a voice or thought that turns up in our head that makes it hard to be kind to ourselves in a way that we would be kind to others. So this voice often has a harsh and critical tone to it, and may tell us things like we need to work harder or we're not trying hard enough to cope. Yet when we hear the stories of similar experiences to ours from others, we often respond in an understanding, kind and compassionate manner. If only we could show ourselves the same kindness. So there's 2 main steps of being kind to ourselves. The first one is to notice when we're not being kind, when that harsh critical voice comes up. And then the second step is to reflect on how you would respond to a friend in a similar situation. So what kind of things would you say to a friend? Chances are you tell them they're doing the best they can given the difficult circumstances, or something like that they will find a way to get through whatever the future holds. And so it's often helpful to write statements like this down so that you can look back on it at times when you feel discouraged or feel that your fears are getting you down. Another question, a helpful question you can ask yourself is, what advice would you give? Often we'll tell our friends in similar situations to reduce expectations on themselves. So for example, not to book, a bunch of routine medical appointments in the same week as when you have a dermatology or an appointment with your melanoma specialist. Another piece of advice we'd offer is to accept support and help from family and friends during tough times. And the last piece of advice we might offer a friend is to do activities that help soothe and relax you, and activities you enjoy. So we know that maintaining a healthy lifestyle is important to both your physical and emotional well-being during and after melanoma treatment. So looking after yourself includes maintaining your follow-up visits, so making sure you have appointments with your specialist booked in, keeping active, eating well, rest and recuperating, so making sure you have downtime and a good sleep routine, doing activities you enjoy. So when you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed, it can be helpful to have things to look forward to. So making plans to do activities that you enjoy can help you take your mind off things and make you feel more in control of your situation. And then the last one there is finding a new normal. So being diagnosed with melanoma and undergoing treatment can be life-changing. So perhaps you have a new perspective on life, or you're ready for a fresh start. So no matter how you feel, it's okay to take the time to find your new normal. So this might include thinking about what's most important in your life to put your time and energy into now, joining a support group, or channeling your energy for good by volunteering or participating in a charity event. Okay, so now we're going to look just very quickly at some support resources that are there. So as I'm sure most of you or all of you know, the Melanoma Patients Australia website has some fantastic information and resources on there. They also have support services information there, which includes information about the melanoma nurse telehealth service, support groups, peer support, and legal and financial assistance. And they've also got information on their website about the Wellness Hub that provides tips on how to improve your wellness as you live with melanoma. The Melanoma Institute Australia website also has some great information on there, in particular the patient information page, which has patient guides for different stages of melanoma, the melanoma question and answer booklet, which is particularly really helpful for people with early stage melanoma, and the patient information brochures, which provides information on different types of melanoma, different procedures and exercise recommendations for procedures. We also have a patient support webpage as part of the Melanoma Institute Australia website. And so on there we have our supportive care matters blogs and articles, which is written by our clinical psychology and supportive care team at MIA. So if you find that your fear of melanoma recurrence is causing you significant amounts of distress, or it is starting to interfere with your everyday life, it is often helpful to talk to your melanoma specialist or your GP about how you're feeling. So they might be able to refer you for some psychological support. And so if you're connected to a hospital department, they'll refer you to the psycho-oncology team at the hospital, or they can refer you to a private psychologist under a mental health care plan. Alternatively, you might like to contact you might like to speak to one of our counsellors available through the Cancer Council. And on our patient support webpage, we also have a melanoma support service directory with a bunch of information about different services available in the community. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening to our presentation. We'll hand over back to Victoria.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Claire. What an amazing presentation. So many practical tips for patients and families, and you know, just back to basics things, really things that, you know, you just forget about in the midst of the stress and anxiety that a diagnosis can bring. You know, just the controlling your breathing and some of the things, looking at the things you've got control over and seeking help and support and putting that support team around you, wrap around the things that you forget about sometimes and when you think you can go it alone. So fantastic strategies and ideas. A little reminder to everyone watching that you can post your questions in the Q&A function. We've got one in there already, but it would be great to get a few more questions coming in over the next little while, and then we can get together at the end and come back and answer all those questions together. So thank you so much, Claire and Lisa. Really appreciate your presentation, and I look forward to chatting to you again at the end. So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker to the stage, Ingrid Kivikoski. Ingrid will be sharing her personal story of melanoma and particular focus on fear of recurrence. I'd like to welcome you, Ingrid, to the stage.
Thank you, Victoria, for the warm welcome, and Lisa and Claire for your great ideas. I'm Ingrid, as Victoria said, and I have metastatic melanoma stage 4 with an unknown primary. My journey started nearly 7 years ago, a couple of weeks before Christmas, as Victoria said, in 2016. I had asked earlier my GP to look at a lump just above my breast, and he just shrugged it off. By the way, he's not my GP anymore, but we won't go there. Luckily, a few weeks later, I went in for my usual mammogram and I asked them to look at it. Well, there is a question on there saying, have you got any new lumps? So they looked at it, then they organised a fine needle biopsy straight away. Obviously, they knew something that I didn't. And a few days later, I was told I had a carcinoma. Me thinking, because I was in a breast screen clinic and the lump being above my breast, it must be breast cancer. But they didn't know what sort of cancer it was. So I was sent for CT scans at the closest hospital. They did not show up anything, but they retested the biopsy bit, and I was told I had metastatic melanoma with an unknown primary, as I had no mold as a primary, just the enlarged lymph node. That would have had to be the hardest and most freaked out time in my melanoma journey, as when the doctor asked my height and weight, gets me every time, this bit, my height and weight, I said, I don't know. And he said, my scales are over there, please go and weigh yourself. Well, I couldn't get up as my legs just went numb, I think paralysed with fear. Luckily, there was a breast care nurse in the room and she calmed me down and helped me get up eventually. We won't go through about breast care nurses and melanoma nurses. I would love to see them. Within a few weeks, I was in another hospital, one that deals with melanoma, having a full lymph node dissection where they took 27 nodes and 7 had melanoma. So I became stage 3C. About a month later, I had 20 days of radiation. I was told this was to mop up any stray cells. Mind you, we're talking back in 2017 when they did not offer immunotherapy as adjuvant treatment. I was just told to go home and just resume life, which was a bit hard as I was also dealing with lymphedema from the radiation. Well, 7 months later, my breast became enlarged and very red. So I was put into hospital on IV antibiotics as they thought it was cellulitis. But when the antibiotics were not working, they did a few more tests thinking it could be breast cancer. They did a punch biopsy of the breast. Ouch. I won't go into full details as I presume there are quite a few males watching at the moment. I also had a PET scan and that lit up like a Christmas tree. So it had gone everywhere, meaning my melanoma had progressed and I was now stage 4. The day I found out, 5 January 2018, funny how you never forget the dates, do you? They put me on targeted therapy as I needed something that would work very fast, and it certainly did the trick. I have now been on them for nearly 6 years and NED, no evidence of disease, for about 5 years. This targeted therapy is usually only effective for between 9 and 15 months, and I'm hitting 6 years. How lucky am I? It certainly has saved my life. Goes to show how every body is so different. I also have been very lucky with side effects, as have only had some mild ones over the years. Although last year I was getting very bad mouth ulcers, like a whole mouthful at a time. So my oncologist said, let's try taking the targeted therapy tablets for 5 days off and then 5 days off. And it seems to be working. The only thing is, by not being on them for 5 days, my melanoma could start up again. I did check with my oncologist the other week and made sure that was correct, and he couldn't even say yes, he just went like that. So this does not help my fear of cancer recurrence. Fear of cancer recurrence or progression is real. I have been dealing with it for 5 years now, and it is exhausting. Just daily worry of recurrence, such as getting a headache and then thinking it has gone to your brain. I can laugh, but I don't laugh at the time. Sore belly, and I'm thinking it's back in some organs. Unfortunately, your mind spirals to the worst case scenario. And then we have CT scans every 3 months to see if the treatment is still working. This is where anxiety comes in, which is also very real. For me, it's not the actual scan, but waiting for the results of this scan that gets me. I do like this saying, regardless of the outcome, I will get through this, like that. I would suggest you checking with your oncologist for a referral to a psychologist. Claire mentioned these things. For anyone who could help you, if it impairs you living some sort of quality of life. Some survivors describe it as a dark cloud or a shadow. They might be able to help you with strategies such as mindfulness, relaxation exercise. Again, Claire and Lisa talked about that. Deep breathing, music therapy, yoga, walking. In my case, a hobby. Hoping this will alleviate the fear a bit. I read somewhere that a counsellor suggested a scheduled worrying and weeping time. I thought that was a great idea, and Lisa suggested it too. Another counsellor suggested reframing the mindset from one of doom to realising not everything is a recurrence. Easier said than done, I say. Also, write down your worries, even if it's just words in cloud bubbles. Getting it out onto paper and then putting it away safely can also be therapeutic. Or a gratitude journal might help some. My first counsellor, I think Lisa suggested detached mindfulness, suggested I picture me being in the surf and a wave coming in with a beautiful flower wreath on it. Imagine putting all your fears on that wreath, then you push it back out to sea with the wave. But it does come back, doesn't it? So you need to push it out again. This can happen numerous times a day, and sometimes I go to bed exhausted for pushing that wreath back out all day, but it works for me. Here are some real reasons behind your fears. First one, fear of treatment not working anymore. This is my fear. And having to go to plan B, immunotherapy, and needing a port inserted, and as I'm very hard to cannulate. Or fear of recurrence if you have finished treatment and you have to start up again. Number two, losing control over your life. I think Claire mentioned that. Especially since you lost control the first time and thought you could relax a bit after being NED. I recently saw a saying, and it said, you can't control whether cancer returns, so instead focus on what you can do to support yourself in other ways. Number three, facing impending death again. FCR, fear of cancer recurrence or progression, has been considered one of the most unmet needs reported by patients. I think it is mainly because nowadays, with all the new treatments out, we are surviving longer. So early recognition, support, and validations are so beneficial. Can a positive outlook prevent fear of cancer recurrence? Some studies have shown that keeping a positive attitude or outlook does not change a person's chance of survival or the course of their disease, but there are studies that have shown being optimistic optimistic, and having a positive attitude can lead to a better quality of life. Furthermore, social emotional support, in my case, the Melanoma Patients Australia support group, a Facebook group, allows me to learn how others are coping with their fears. You can chat online with like-minded people who understand this complicated world of melanoma. I call them my tribe. It is not only an advice network, but a great tool for feedback. It also lessens the loneliness that accompanies fear, as family and friends just do not truly understand. They think that I am cured, as I have been NED for so many years and I look fine. Don't you love that one? They cannot see or understand why I feel the way I do. So I only tell a select few people when I'm due to have a scan, as I don't want them saying, oh, you will be all right. Every other scan has been good, but on the inside, I'm screaming. But I have worked out that there are no TAFE course on what to say or what not to say in situations like these. And because they haven't experienced it, really, how would they know? I must admit, I didn't know any of this before I was diagnosed. Here are some of my fellow MPA Facebook group friends' stories. And yes, I did get their permission. One has said that she is terrified, reluctant to book another holiday to Japan, as the last 2 times she tried to book, she has had a recurrence. I sure do hope she gets to book that next trip soon. Another one has said, waiting is so taxing emotionally. Your head doesn't stop bouncing between being hopeful and imagining the worst. It's an exhausting roller coaster to be on. I love this motivational saying that I saw on a Facebook group the other day. Thank you, Audrey. And with really, really try and stick to it. As we say, it's easier said than done. Stressing about the future will rob you of today's joys. Live your life one day at a time. I could go on and on about this topic, but Victoria won't let me. So thank you for listening, and please look after yourself as best as you can. Also, many thanks to Melanoma Patients Australia and MIA for organising these fabulous webinars and asking me to be the speaker on fear of cancer recurrence. It has been an honour.
Wow, Ingrid, that was wonderful, really from the heart. And, you know, you really openly shared the challenges and some fantastic strategies that you've used to cope in difficult circumstances. So on behalf of everyone, a huge thank you to you for sharing such a personal and ongoing story, and your love of sharing, you know, to help others. So it's really very, very wonderful. I'd like to invite our other speakers back to the screen. Claire and Lisa, are you there? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You're there, but I can't hear you. Ingrid, while I've got you on here, how about I start with a question for you, and hopefully we can get Claire and Lisa back on with audio shortly. They look like they're trying their very hardest to do it. So fingers crossed. I'm going to start with this question now, Ingrid, just while Claire and Lisa have a go at getting back on audio. Leanne's put a question in. She is challenged with special occasions and milestone events. So she's received a terminal diagnosis and really feels a lot of grief around the extra time and, you know, milestone special occasions when they arrive, and fear kind of sets in. Will the melanoma come back? Will it steal away that special time, that special occasion? Yeah, I wondered, you know, from your experience, Ingrid, is that something that you relate to?
Yes, and it's such a hard one because people say, you know, there was lots of strategies by Lisa and Claire, you know, keep busy. Well, you can't keep busy 24 hours a day, can you? So you keep busy and it'll, you know, take care of a few hours a day, but there's still lots of others. And then when you go to bed, you know, it all starts up heavy then. Just realize that it will happen, and don't get cranky with yourself. Just think all the bad thoughts, but if you can be optimistic as well, it does help. I think I mentioned that optimism, how it helps you. I mean, it won't get rid of the cancer, unfortunately, but it will help you, your brain. I think that's what's kept me going, being so optimistic, positive.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Ingrid, you talked about in your talk about the support that you've had from peers, I guess, in lots of different forms. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that. Obviously, I mentioned in the intro that you facilitate our Brisbane support group, and you're kind of focused on giving back, I guess, you know, the support that you've had during your journey from others with lived experience. But I wonder if you could tell me a bit more about your, you know, the experience you've had in getting support and giving support to people, you know, walking the walk with similar experience to yourself.
What's so great with the Facebook group is what you get back, and you can put anything in there at any time of day or night. You know, it can be midnight and there'll be somebody on, and they understand. Like I said in my talk, is I call them my tribe, because, you know, friends and family are lovely, but they, like I said, they don't understand it completely, and they just go, oh, you know, they might think if you said something that you're being negative, but it's reality, and we can say on the Facebook group exactly how you feel, you know, and we all understand, and all these people get on and say, oh yes, I know exactly how you feel, and it's brilliant. It really is good. A sounding board, I suppose. Oh, I think Claire and Lisa are back, are we?
I hope so.
Are we back?
We've got you.
Sorry about that.
Goodness me, we did not touch anything. We've just been sitting here listening.
You know,
sorry,
you know what they
everyone.
say, Claire and Lisa, it'll be all right on the night. You know, it's all good.
I'm glad you're back.
A wonderful job. Ingrid had you back there, and she's done a great job.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Through, you know,
And I was going to say, fantastic presentation, Ingrid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we're very pleased we've got you back, because there are some tough questions here, and yeah, I addressed the first one with Ingrid on our own, but I guess a question for you, Claire and Lisa, around strategies for managing fear when special occasions and milestones come along that you perhaps never thought you'd get to see, and that time comes around for a special occasion, and that fear of recurrence creeps in, and the worry that your special time could be stolen away. I just wondered, have you got any strategies around those kind of feelings that people have around fear of recurrence and missing out on beautiful family occasions?
You can go. I think that any of the strategies that we've talked about tonight can be used at any time. I don't think that there's any sort of specific ones that need to be used at this specific time. I think that they can all be really applicable at different points. But something that Ingrid touched on actually that I think is a really helpful and really beautiful strategy is practicing gratitude. Gratitude journaling, reflecting on gratitude, practicing mindfulness and presence, and enjoying those moments that you have at the time that you have them. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to introduce, much like what Claire was talking about, enjoying is just savouring those special moments and really kind of getting into those minute details of it and enjoying it. And again, I think detached mindfulness can be practiced there in that you can notice these worries and concerns come up, just acknowledge them and say, yep, but I'm going to keep it over there. It can be in the room with me, but it's going to be at the side, not getting in the way of me having these beautiful moments with my family and friends.
Great advice. Thank you for that. We've got a question from Greg in the Q&A. He's previously been diagnosed with melanoma following a primary in his left cheek. It metastasized to his left lung. And he's been having sort of PET scans over a few years, which didn't detect any further activity. And it's now 11 years on. And he's really just not sure about whether he's still at risk. He's feeling a bit abandoned, although he's not saying he's stressed about it, but he's worried about recurrence and what the options are moving forward. What advice would you give for somebody in that situation where they're quite worried about recurrence?
I guess, firstly, I might suggest asking the questions that you have for your medical team, whoever that might be, whether it is one of your melanoma specialists or a GP, whoever is looking after you. And some people can find it helpful to write down before the appointment questions or things that they have on their mind, because sometimes you can go into those appointments with doctors, specialists, and the appointments get hijacked or sidetracked with other things, and you might leave that appointment with lots of information, but also get into the car and then think, oh, I had all these things that I wanted to talk about, all these questions that I wanted to ask, and I just didn't get the opportunity, or I lost those while I was in there because we were talking about other things. So writing a question prompt list as you go into those or before you go into those appointments, and even giving that to the doctor and saying, look, these are some questions I've got. What is my risk of recurrence? I'm 11 years on now, and this is something that plays on my mind. Can you give me some of that information? I think anxiety thrives in uncertainty, in the not knowing. So having those questions answered, asking those questions can be really helpful.
I think that's great advice, Claire.
That's great. That's great. And Ingrid, is that something you do if you're worried? You've got a question list when you head off into the to see your clinician?
I certainly do have my question list, and he just looks at me as I put it on the desk and he goes, I knew you'd turn up with that. So yes, because it's a whole different world when you get in there, whereas the week before you can just write down as you think of something, because when you're in there, well, first of all, I'm usually in there to find out, my results. And, imagine if it's bad results, well, forget all the questions. And even with good results, you don't remember them all. That's if you've got lots.
That's
and right. Something I encourage, along with what Ingrid said, is I encourage my patients to write down some of the responses in the appointment itself that your specialist gives you, because it's nothing like walking out of an appointment and saying, did they say 3 or 4 or 5? So to write it down then and there.
Or give it to the doctor and ask them to write it down. So you don't have to be writing in the appointment. Leave space on the list for their answers and ask them to write down some of those responses for you to take home.
Wonderful. I had a great question actually pop up in the chat rather than the Q&A, and it was from Libby. It was about what about financial stress and the associated costs with treatment, because that can bring on a lot of anxiety, stress, fear of just what the costs might be for your treatment moving forward. Have you got any thoughts or tips for people suffering from that?
Yeah, so there's a few kind of resources that we direct our patients to. The Cancer Council has some great information about cancer and finances or money. I can't think of the exact wording of that, but the Cancer Council does have information about finances, and I think even a telephone line that you can call to talk about that. For patients living in regional or regional or rural or outside metropolitan areas as well. There's funding from the government, the state governments, to help with travel assistance and accommodation as well. There's a lot of cost involved in melanoma care, unfortunately, but I think if there's resources that people can draw upon, every dollar counts.
That's right.
I was just going to add, I think where people are receiving treatment as well, I think makes a difference. In public hospitals, they'll often have a social work department as well. So if you are receiving treatment publicly, you can ask your treating team if they have social workers in the hospital, and they can help navigate, Centrelink and link you in with other financial supports. I don't know that private settings have access to that. I'm not sure, but I know in public hospitals they'll often have support through social work.
Wonderful. Thanks for the advice. There's a great question put forward. Someone who's got a similar experience to Ingrid, but was misdiagnosed by his GP twice. This isn't an uncommon story. Ingrid shared her story, a similar story, and the influence this has on anxiety for patients during and following their treatment, and how to manage that, how to manage perhaps not getting the diagnosis correct at the beginning, and having some struggles around that from a fear of recurrence and anxiety perspective.
Is that for me? I try not to think of that GP. I've had to get them right out of my mind because I'm not following through with it. So I thought, well, no. And the breast screen were just brilliant, who's found it, and now the hospital is brilliant where I am. So I'm just trying not to even think about that because I'm not pursuing it. So yeah.
Great. Okay. We've got a question in the chat around managing sad feelings, and it's around potential losses. So particularly that a person might have to have surgery and lose really critical parts of their body from the melanoma diagnosis, and it's making them feel very sad, and they're just asking for some advice and strategies on how to manage sadness.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is to know that sadness is real, and that's a really normal feeling for loss. And so just to kind of, be able to understand that for yourself, that there's not something wrong. Of course, you're going to feel sad with what's happening to you. I think coming back to part of our presentation that was talking about being kind to yourself and self-compassion, and what kind of advice would you give your friend if they were in a similar situation? You tell them that they've done wonderfully, and of course it's sad, and you try to do things to soothe that ache, really. So I think the biggest thing is just being kind to yourself and holding that for yourself, talking to friends who might understand, or talking to fellow peers in the melanoma community as well, can provide incredible support and help to hold some of that sad feelings.
Yeah. And Ingrid, have you got any advice for managing sadness?
Same thing. I would go to the Facebook group rather than family. Family, I think we've all talked about it, just don't really understand it like all us, our tribe does. So I can't think of anything else at the moment.
Yeah. And someone in the chats mentioned that they feel very unheard by their friends, and they've had lots of comments like, oh, you look so healthy and so well. Yet, on the inside, they know they've got a stage 4 diagnosis and it's really challenging. So tips for working with family and friends, and helping them to understand. Obviously you get your group around you in the peer group, but you still have to live with your family, and you want to engage with your friends during the journey. So are there certain things, Ingrid, that you've done to sort of work around that?
Like I said in my talk, I don't tell I only tell a certain small group of people when I'm having a scan. It just saves more stress on me, and them saying things, which they think they should be saying, and just inside you're just screaming, but you want to be nice, so you're not rude. But yeah, the Facebook group is brilliant. I just noticed somebody's put on, have I ever been on immunotherapy? Or have you only been on targeted therapy? I've only just been on targeted therapy. They did not offer immuno to me at all in the beginning. I think that was Ian, sorry.
Right. All right, thank you. Claire and Lisa, have you got any wrap-up comments that you'd like to make? Any, we've had a range of questions there. Is there any sort of takeaway key things that we should be thinking as we finish up tonight?
I think the journey with melanoma is hard, and so my biggest advice to everyone is to be kind to yourself, to know that you are doing the best you can in difficult circumstances, and that you can keep on going, but just do that gently with yourself.
That's lovely. Thank you. And Ingrid, you summed it up beautifully with your quote, but have you got any final last words that you'd like to share?
Just keep pushing that wreath away in the surf, and it'll come back, and just keep pushing it away. It works for me. It really does. Because it will come back. You can't just go one day and think, oh gosh, I'm not going to think about it this week. It just doesn't happen. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, look, on behalf of everyone at Melanoma Patients Australia and Melanoma Institute Australia, a huge thank you to all of you, Ingrid, Claire and Lisa, for your wonderful presentations this evening on a really tricky topic. We know it's a huge topic for our patients and family members across the country, and it's one that needs to be talked about more openly, and we want everybody to reach out and get the support and strategies that they need to better manage their diagnosis. And I think tonight you've shared some wonderful strategies and tips and advice for the community. So I thank you very much for everything you've done. I also want to remind everyone that support is available through Melanoma Patients Australia support line, our telehealth nurse service and support groups across the country. Encourage anyone who needs to get help to reach out to us, and also to reach out to Melanoma Institute Australia and their wonderful website and other services that they offer. You're not alone. I think there are, wonderful people like Claire and Lisa around the country, and volunteers like Ingrid running support groups out there for you to connect into and to make the most of the support that's out there. I'd like to remind you there's a survey following the event. We'd love to hear your feedback on tonight's event, and it will help us to develop our future webinars. If you could take a few minutes to do that, it would be wonderful. This webinar recording will be shared with everyone in the coming days, as mentioned on the MIA and MPA websites. And on behalf of everybody, I hope you found this evening valuable, and our whole series incredibly valuable. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you and good night.